In Venezuela, the Colombian Government and the National Liberation Army held the fourth round of peace talks. The Dominican Republic authorities registered 2 dead and 28 injured after a large explosion at a shopping mall in the town of San Cristobal. And in Russia, the Army 2023 Forum was launched, showcasing Russian defense system, technical efficiency upgrades and improvements, as well as promoting the innovative development of the national industrial complex. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Monday, the fourth round of talks between the National Liberation Army and the Colombian government got underway in Caracas, Venezuela. Both delegations will review the bilateral ceasefire that came into effect on August 3rd, the longest ceasefire agreed with this insurgent group. Both sides will highlight the progress made so far, especially regarding the ceasefire and the setup of the National Participation Committee. In that regard, the delegations have emphasized that both the initial truce started in June and the ceasefire, including the implementation of its monitoring and verification mechanisms, have led to this resumption of dialogue.
We think that if we expect that what we sign here be implemented, that in itself proves that there is a commitment to achieve a political resolution to the conflict. This roundtable, since it started here in Caracas last October and continued in November, has been signing a series of agreements under the logic that what is agreed upon and signed be implemented.
The head of the Colombian government's peace delegation, Oti Patiño, announced the start of the fourth round of talks and assured that peace with the National Liberation Army will contribute to the construction of a democratic state.
We are beginning a new cycle of talks. The first was right here in Venezuela, and in it we consolidate the principle that peace is an issue that transcends armed organizations and governments. It is a matter for the state and involves the institution and society in general. From this perspective, the peace that we are making with the National Liberation Army, the last rebel political organization of those that emerged in the revolutionary hurricane of the 1960s, must contribute to the construction of a state with full democracy.
During the inauguration of the fourth cycle of peace talks between the delegations of the National Liberation Army and the government of Colombia, Executive Vice President Delcy Rodriguez stressed that Venezuela relentlessly supports the total peace policies of the government of Gustavo Petro.
Well, we want to highlight in this fourth cycle, and I have heard it from both sides, that it's very important to adopt humanitarian relief measures for the communities that have been impacted by this armed conflict. I believe that it becomes a humanitarian objective, an objective that cannot be postponed, in an urgent objective that must be addressed to impact and reduce the effects of the armed conflict, especially in the communities that have seen their right to develop really affected as a result of the conflict. Venezuela, as a guarantor country, supports all of its possibilities without rest, the total peace policies of President Gustavo Petro and the government of President Gustavo Petro, that it can lead us to the right path for a lasting peace, a peace that really feels the people as their own and that can keep away his path from the enemies of peace.
In the Dominican Republic, at least 2 people died and 28 were injured after an explosion at a shopping mall in the town of San Cristobal. According to local media, the incident took place in a plastic factory on Padre Ayala Street near the Central Park. For the party, authorities work in the place to put out the fire and start the investigation process, which so far it is speculated that it is a gasoline explosion or a fuel tanker truck. Also, those affected are being assisted at the San Cristobal clinic, and the exact number of deceased people is still unknown. In Argentina, the central bank recorded an 18.3% devaluation of the peso after the victory of the opposition party led by Javier Milei in Sunday's primaries. After the central bank's decision, the dollar jumped 62.65% in its official quotation, an advance of 21.8% with respect to last Friday's close. In this sense, dollar-denominated bonds and Argentine stocks on the Wall Street fell by an average of more than 10%, while the leading index of the Buenos Aires Stock Exchange fell 0.3%. This comes after Javier Milei pointed out that it is feasible to implement dollarization in the country in spite of the scarcity of dollars in the nation. On Monday, the funeral of the former provisional president of Haiti, Boniface Alexandre, who assumed the leadership of the country after the second coup d'etat against Jean-Bertrand Aristide, took place. The national funeral was held in the morning hours at the Court of Cassation. The ceremony counted with the participation of high government authorities and a heartfelt tribute to what some experts describe as the great servant of the state. Alexandre, a lawyer and jurist, served as president of the nation from 2004 to 2006 after the second coup d'etat against Jean-Bertrand Aristide. He organized the elections that gave victory to René Préval. During the government of Jovenel Moïse, he led the commission that submitted a proposal for constitutional reform. The government of Canada has incorporated the armed forces in efforts to suppress forest fires. This is in response to a request for help from the territorial government, motivated by the difficulty in controlling the flames due to the intensity of the fire, which has so far devastated more than 100,000 hectares, causing the evacuation of the surrounding populations located in the northwest of the country. In this regard, the Minister of National Defense, Bill Blair, explained that the contribution of the military will be focused on fire suppression efforts, air transport, planning, coordination, and logistics. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Mexico, authorities said Monday that more than a dozen bodies have been found in freezers in a Mexican region racked by drug cartel-related violence. Prosecutor Veronica Hernandez informed that 6 suspects were detained after the grisly discovery in the city of Costa Rica. The discovery was made on Sunday as police chased a suspect who hid in a building where 3 kidnapped victims were held. Veracruz is one of Mexico's most violent regions due to fighting between rival gangs for control of lucrative drug trafficking routes to the United States. The Latin American nation has recorded more than 400,000 murders since the launch of a controversial military anti-drug offensive in 2006.
I can inform that respective investigations have been opened in the case of human remains that were found inside freezers in 2 properties in the city of Costa Rica. Initial indications are that unfortunately there could be more than 13 bodies, with the likelihood that others are in the process of being identified. I can also confirm that 6 people have been detained who are probably linked to these events. Prosecutors, experts, and ministerial police are carrying out the corresponding investigations on the basis of the evidence found in both properties.
Mexican Foreign Minister Alicia Bárcena met with the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Jake Sullivan to discuss the immigration crisis. In her first visit to the United States, the Foreign Minister expressed concern of the placement of the wall of buoys along the Rio Bravo. In this regard, she welcomed the U.S. Justice Department's demand against the Texas state government for its placement, since this represents a measure that violates the sovereignty of both countries. Bárcena also held a meeting with the director of PAHO and WHO, Jarbas Barbosa, as part of the International Meeting on Pharmacovigilance of the Americas of the Regulatory Agency for Drugs and Medical Devices of Latin America and the Caribbean. On Monday in Moscow, the 2023 International Military Technical Forum got underway. The aim of this fair is to showcase Russian defense system technical efficiency, upgrades and improvements, and to foster innovations across the Russian industrial complex. In his opening remarks, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Moscow is ready to work with those who defend an independent development option and their respective national interests, while calling on nations to build an indivisible security system. This event, which had its first edition in 2015, is a large-scale exhibition of the latest developments in military equipment where future projects are unveiled, and they exhibit equipment newly built or recently introduced into service by the Russian military.
Russia is open to deepening equal technological partnership and military technical cooperation with other countries, with everyone who defends their national interests, their independent path of development, and consider it fundamentally important to build together an equal, indivisible security system that will reliably protect each state.
Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, speaking at the Army in 2023 forum, said that the best response to sanctions is to strengthen cooperation with other countries.
In a difficult international situation, you found the opportunity to come, thereby showing your desire to continue relations, strengthen and develop mutually beneficial cooperation. This is the best answer to fans of sanctions and destructive forces that create tension, cause chaos and disorder.
Belarus Defense Minister Viktor Kreshnin stressed that in the midst of global instability, the Army Forum has become a symbol of strategic partnership.
Amid global instability and unprecedented pressure from the collective Western states pursuing their own sovereign and independent policies, the Army Forum has become a symbol of the establishment and development of strategic partnership.
The Russian Defense Ministry reported that its forces repelled 6 attacks and counterattacks in Ukraine's northeast and attacked Ukrainian facilities used to produce drone boats in an overnight strike.
In the Kupiansk area, as a result of Air Force strikes and artillery fire, of the courageous actions of the units of the Western Group of Forces, 6 enemy attacks and counterattacks were successfully repelled in the areas of the settlements of Novoselivske, of the Luhansk People's Republic, Petrotravneve, Sinkivka and Mankivka in the Kharkiv region. Last night, the armed forces of the Russian Federation carried out a group strike with high-precision, long-range sea-based weapons against production and storage facilities for unmanned boats used by the armed forces of Ukraine for terrorist attacks. The aim was achieved. All designated targets were hit.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the south. On Monday, at least 3 people were killed and 7 injured in Afghanistan after an explosion breathed through a hotel in the eastern province of Khost. Khost police spokesman Mostaq Ghafir Gurbaz said the hotel was frequented by Afghans and refugees from the former militants' stronghold of Waziristan in the north of the country. Authorities are investigating the circumstances that caused the detonation as well as those responsible for the attack. The Taliban government blamed the regional branch of the self-styled Islamic State in the province of Khorasan for this incident due to the previous attacks.
The blast was in a hotel. It is not clear what kind of blast it was. 3 people were martyred and 7 people were wounded. The wounded have been transported to the hospitals and are under medical treatment.
The Syrian government announced a terrorist attack against worshippers at the religious mausoleum of Shah Cheragh in the city of Shiraz, southern Iran. The perpetrators of the attack that left at least 1 person dead and 8 others seriously injured is attributed to the Daesh group. For this reason, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs indicated that it rejects the criminal act where innocent citizens, including children and the elderly, are killed and that unsuccessfully seek to undermine the security and stability of the nation. Likewise, it questioned the silence of the countries that claim to defend human rights but refuse to react to this criminal act. On Monday, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi welcomed the Palestinian and Jordanian leaders. Al-Sisi met with King Abdullah II of Jordan and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the northeastern coastal city of El Alamein. During a tripartite meeting, the leaders discussed the development of the Palestinian cause and expressed their support for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with each Jerusalem as the future Palestinian capital. The summit was held to discuss U.S. efforts to achieve normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel and the Palestinian Authority's requirements in the framework of the signing of such a deal. Egypt was the first Arab country to normalize ties with Israel in 1979, followed by Jordan in 1994. Both countries are key allies of Saudi Arabia. On Monday, Ethiopia's House of People's Representatives voted in favor of a state emergency declared by the federal government over violence in the Amara region. Clashes between members of the Ethiopian army and a local militia known as Fano erupted earlier this month in towns and cities across Amara after a month of tensions. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government imposed a 6-month state of emergency across the region on August 4th, and several cities remain under curfew, although violence eased towards the end of last week. The unrest revived fears about the stability of Africa's second most populous country, 7 months after a peace deal ended a brutal 2-year conflict in the neighboring region of Tigray.
The illegal militancy in the Amara National Regional Government is causing humanitarian and material damage. For instance, the killing and suffering of innocent citizens. In general, it has caused a threat to the safety of residents of the region. Related peace and security issues shake the constitutional order, present a danger to the sovereignty of the country and public peace and safety. Therefore, to stop the situation, declaring a state of emergency has become necessary.
In Sudan, the head of the military gave a televised speech on Monday, nearly 4 months into the deadly war. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan accused the rival RSF of committing violations under the falsehood of promising to restore democracy. The fighting between the nation's most powerful generals, who once derailed a short-lived transition to democracy, has resulted in violent battles. They have exacted a devastating toll on human lives and infrastructure. In a report unveiled earlier this month, international authorities recorded extensive war crimes and unimaginable horror. Human rights organizations accuse both warring parties of committing extensive war crimes, including deliberate killings of civilians and sexual violence.
Our country is facing the largest conspiracy in its modern history, targeting the entity, identity, heritage, and fate of our people, who have been since the morning of the 15th of April, facing with patience and faith the worst of terrorism and war crimes at the hands of the militia of the traitorous rebel Hemti and his aides, who led the largest operation in this country based on misinformation, lies, deceit, falsification of facts, and buying of people, under the banner of institutional falsehood called Rapid Support Forces.
We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.